Amara took a deep breath as she stepped into the bustling terminal at JFK International Airport. The announcement boards flickered with flight information, and the air was filled with the familiar hum of travelers. In one arm, Amara cradled her infant son, Felix, while with the other hand, she guided a collapsible double stroller holding his twin sister, Lilia. It was early evening, and the international departure terminal was alive with activity. Suited business people rushing by, families herding children, and vacationers snapping selfies before long flights. Amid this crowd, Amara felt both determined and anxious. For a single mother traveling alone with twin 11-month-olds, every step was a challenge. She had carefully planned this trip for weeks, double-checking every detail. Her diaper bag was meticulously packed with formula, bottles, diapers, toys, everything to survive a long flight. She even had to purchase an extra seat and bring an approved car seat for one of the twins, since airline regulations require a separate seat for a second infant when one adult travels with two babies. It had cost more than she could comfortably afford, but it was the only way to fulfill her journey. This trip was more than just a vacation. It was a promise. After losing her husband over a year ago, Amara had vowed to take their twins to meet their paternal grandparents overseas in Paris. Her late husband's parents had been longing to see their grandchildren, and, despite her grief and trepidation, Amara was determined to make it happen. Yet, navigating the airport alone was proving exhausting. As she approached the security checkpoint, Felix began to fuss in her arms. The bright overhead lights and the cacophony of announcements were overwhelming for the little ones. Soon, Lilia joined in with whimpers of her own from the stroller. Amara gently rocked Felix and cooed to Lilia, trying to soothe them while inching forward in line. She felt the weight of impatient stares from other travelers behind her as she struggled to fold the double stroller to send it through the X-ray machine. Her diaper bag threatened to slip off her shoulder, and, sensing her distress, Lilia's whimpers escalated to full cries. A TSA agent signaled for Amara to step aside to remove the baby's blankets and her own shoes. Balancing a squirming Felix, she juggled the task of unlacing her sneakers and removing a bottle of milk from the bag for separate screening. Her face flushed with exertion and embarrassment. "I can do this," she reminded herself. "I have to." Just as one shoe finally came off, the bottle she'd tucked under her arm tumbled to the floor and rolled away. Amara's heart sank until a large, warm hand retrieved the bottle for her and placed it back into her bag with a gentle smile. "Need an extra hand?" came a calm male voice from just behind her. Amara turned to see a tall man with kind hazel eyes and a reassuring smile. He looked to be in his late 30s, casually dressed in jeans and a charcoal sweater, with a rolling carry-on at his side. She had noticed him briefly earlier in the check-in line when he'd offered a friendly grin at the twins. Now here he was, offering help in her moment of struggle. "That would be amazing, thank you." Amara sighed in relief. The stranger smoothly stepped forward. "Here, I'll hold this little guy for a second, if that's okay," he offered, already reaching out arms in an obvious offer to hold Felix. Felix, surprisingly, went willingly, as if sensing the man's gentle demeanor. With one arm, the man held the baby boy securely against his chest. Felix's cries softened, a small thumb finding its way into his mouth, and he blinked up at the stranger in curiosity. Amara exhaled the breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Thank you so much." She paused, realizing she didn't even know his name. "Rowan." He introduced himself with a nod, bouncing Felix lightly to keep him calm. "And it's my pleasure, really." "I'm Amara," she replied, managing a grateful smile. With both hands free now, she quickly dealt with her shoes and gathered her scattered items from the bin. Lilia had quieted at the new distraction of Rowan's presence. The baby. Girl stared at him with wide, fascinated eyes from her stroller. Within a few minutes, Amara cleared the security checkpoint. She accepted Felix back, and Rowan helped refasten the diaper bag on her shoulder. They walked together out of the screening area, Amara maneuvering the stroller while Rowan carried her bag. "You heading to the Paris flight?" Rowan asked conversationally, noticing the destination printed on her boarding pass sticking out of the bag's pocket. "Yes. Flight 719 to Paris, Amara confirmed. I'm sorry, I must look so frazzled. I wasn't expecting both of them to lose it at the same time. Rowan shook his head, dismissing the apology. You're doing great. Flying with one infant is tough. With two, it's practically heroic. There was an admiration in his tone that made Amara feel a flush of gratitude. They reached the gate area where boarding would commence shortly. Amara parked the stroller and lifted each baby out to calm them fully. Felix clung to her shoulder, while Lilia, now quieter, sucked on a pacifier and curiously eyed the people around her. Rowan stayed by Amara's side, keeping a respectful distance yet ready to assist if needed. He noticed the fatigue in her eyes and the way she still maintained a loving smile for her children despite it. As the airline staff announced pre-boarding for passengers with small children, Amara prepared to head to the gate. To her surprise, Rowan, who didn't appear to have any children with him, stepped forward as well. Perhaps he had priority boarding for another reason, she thought. He had mentioned he was on the same flight. Maybe he was a frequent flyer or just wanted to offer a bit more help. Indeed, when Amara started struggling to fold the stroller at the gate, check, a task that required 2 free hands, Rowan was right there. With practiced efficiency, he collapsed the stroller frame and handed it to the gate agent to be checked. I've fought one of these before, he joked lightly, easing her embarrassment. Amara laughed under her breath. It shows. I might need lessons. Together, they walked down the jet bridge. Amara had Felix on her hip and Lilia in her arms now, plus the weighty diaper bag. Rowan carried her car seat. The bulky object had been hanging off the stroller, and his own carry-on. The line of passengers moved slowly onto the aircraft. Despite the chaos of boarding, Amara felt a little bubble of calm in that moment. Thanks to the stranger by her side, who had appeared out of nowhere to help shoulder her burden. She was grateful beyond words. Little did she know that this kind man, Rowan, was far more than he appeared. And their journey was only just beginning. Welcome, dear friends. Tonight, we're not just telling a story, we're exploring compassion, courage, and the kind of love that shows up when life feels heavy. If you believe kindness still matters in our world, please tap subscribe. Turn on the bell and like this video so more hearts can find it. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now, take a deep breath and come with me. The journey is just beginning. They entered the aircraft to find their seats. Amara's tickets were for a window and middle seat in row 23, she had deliberately chosen. A window position so she could secure the car seat and perhaps let one baby sleep undisturbed. Sure enough, seat 23A by the window was where she carefully placed the infant carrier. Seat 23B, the middle, would be her own. To her surprise and relief, Rowan's boarding pass led him to seat 23C on the aisle right next to them. Whether by coincidence or by his quiet intention, he ended up exactly where he could continue lending a hand. The cabin was a typical economy-class setup, rows of narrow seats upholstered. In blue fabric, the overhead bins already filling up with luggage. The air smelled of recirculated ventilation and a hint of coffee from the galley. As Amara slid into her row, juggling baby Lilia in one arm, Rowan immediately offered to hold the car seat steady so she could secure it. Installing a car seat on an airplane seat was tricky at best, threading the seatbelt through the proper slots took some maneuvering, but with Rowan's help, they had it strapped in snugly in no time. He clicked it into place at 23A, and Amara gently buckled Lilia into it. The little girl looked around with big eyes, curious rather than crying for the moment. Meanwhile, baby Felix began to whine, reaching his tiny hands out toward his sister as if unsure why he wasn't in the seat too. Shh, sweetheart, it's okay. You'll sit with Mummy, Amara soothed, easing herself into seat 23B and settling Felix on her lap. She retrieved the special infant seatbelt the airline provided, essentially an extra loop. That buckled into her own seatbelt and fastened it around Felix securely for takeoff. A cheerful flight attendant with a youthful face and a dark blonde braid stopped by their row as passengers were still boarding. Her name tag read Iris in neat lettering. "Hi there, what adorable little ones," Iris exclaimed softly, crouching slightly to be at eye level with the babies. "How old are they?" "Just about 11 months, Amara answered with a polite smile. "Twins, as you can see." "Oh, wonderful. I'm sure they're going to be great little flyers," Iris said kindly. "Is this your first time flying with them?" Amara nodded. "First time with both. I've been a bit nervous about it." "You're doing just fine," Iris assured her. "Let me know if you need anything at all. We have some extra pillows if you want to pad around the car seat, and I can warm any bottles for you when it's safe to move about." "Thank you so much," Amara replied, feeling genuinely grateful. Iris's friendly demeanor eased some of her anxiety. As Iris moved on to assist other passengers, Amara became aware of a grumbling voice in the aisle. A middle-aged man 2 rows behind them was eyeing Amara's babies with clear apprehension. "Great twins," he muttered to his seatmate, not quite as quietly as he probably intended. "This is going to be a fun flight," he added sarcastically. Amara's shoulders tensed. She pretended not to hear, focusing on tucking a soft blanket around Lilia in the car seat. But her cheeks burned with embarrassment. Felix, still on her lap, sensed her unease and started to squirm, emitting a soft whine. Rowan leaned in slightly from his aisle seat, catching Amara's eye. "Ignore him," he whispered reassuringly. "Some people just forget they were babies once too." He offered a lopsided smile that made Amara feel a little better. She gave a small nod, trying to let the stranger's grumbling roll off her back. Soon, the plane's overhead bins were closed, and the captain's voice crackled over the PA system, welcoming everyone aboard and announcing that they were ready for departure. The cabin lights blinked as the aircraft pushed back from the gate. Amara took a deep breath, mentally bracing for the hours ahead. She double-checked that Felix's infant belt was secure and that Lilia was content in her car seat, now sucking on her pacifier calmly. Rowan casually stowed his carry-on under the seat and fastened his seatbelt. Before the plane began to taxi, he turned to Amara again. "If you need anything during the flight, just let me know, okay? I can hold one of them if you need to go to the restroom or anything." His straightforward offer of help was unexpected from a stranger, yet very much appreciated. Amara felt a wave of relief, knowing she wasn't entirely alone in this. "Thank you," she said softly. "I really appreciate everything. I'm sorry if we end up disturbing you." "You have nothing to be sorry for," Rowan replied, shaking his head. "Babies cry. That's just how it is. I don't mind, honestly." He flashed another friendly smile and added, "I'm impressed with how prepared you are. I wouldn't even know where to start if it were me." Amara managed a light laugh. "It's amazing what parenthood forces you to learn," she said. "I was up till midnight packing their bags. Feels like I brought the whole nursery on board." Rowan chuckled. "Well, if you forgot anything, I bet it's not something essential. You strike me as someone who covers all the bases." There was that tone of respect again, as if he really meant it. A gentle warmth spread in Amara's chest at his words. It had been a long time since someone had complimented her on anything, let alone her mothering. Since her husband Jason's passing, she'd had to rely on her own wits and strength. Hearing validation, even from a kind stranger, felt like a small boost of confidence. The plane taxied and soon lined up on the runway. As the engines roared to life for takeoff, Amara instinctively cradled Felix closer. She knew the change in air pressure might upset the baby's ears. At her feet, she had a small bag with pacifiers and bottles ready, sucking on something. During ascent and descent was supposed to help little ones equalize the pressure. Lilia was already sucking her pacifier diligently. Felix, however, pushed his out and whimpered, not sure what was going on as the vibration and noise grew. Rowan noticed and gently tapped Felix's tiny hand, drawing the baby's curious gaze. "Hey, buddy, it's all right," he said in a low, soothing tone. To Amara's surprise, Rowan began humming softly, a simple, calm tune that was audible just above the engine noise. His voice was low and steady. Felix momentarily paused his fussing, focusing on Rowan's face and the vibration of his hum. Amara felt a surge of gratitude. In that moment, the plane lifted off the ground, pressing them back into their seats. Lilia let out a small whine, but remained relatively calm with her pacifier. Felix squirmed at the unfamiliar sensation, a cry building in his throat, but Rowan kept humming, and the distraction seemed to ease the baby's discomfort for the crucial first few moments of the ascent. Amara whispered soothing words to her son and silently thanked every lucky star for Rowan's presence. She had been so nervous about this flight, and while it wasn't going to be easy, at least there was someone kind by her side. The plane climbed to cruising altitude. Lights blinked off, and then the seatbelt sign pinged off as well. A collective rustle of movement went through the cabin as people relaxed. Amara exhaled. The first hurdle was done. Both babies had made it through takeoff without an all-out meltdown. A small victory. She knew they might get fussy later, but at least for now, things were okay. Felix was peering up at her, wide awake but calm for the moment, possibly thanks to Rowan's continued gentle humming and funny faces he was now making. Lilia was dozing off, the gentle motion of the plane lulling her. Amara allowed herself to relax a fraction. She looked over to Rowan, who was now quietly thumbing through the in-flight magazine, giving her a chance to tend to the twins without hovering. Sensing her gaze, he glanced back with a friendly raise of his eyebrows, as if to say, "All good?" She nodded appreciatively. Yes, for now, all was as good as it could be. But both of them knew there were many hours still ahead on this journey, and in those hours, anything could happen. It wasn't long after takeoff, perhaps an hour into the flight, after the first cabin service, that the peace Amara cherished was broken. The Boeing 777 was cruising high over the Atlantic when a bout of turbulence rattled through the cabin. The seatbelt sign pinged on with a ding, and a slight jolt stirred Lilia awake. Almost immediately, the infant girl began to cry in discomfort, her face scrunching up. The sudden jerking movement of the plane had startled her. Amara, who had been trying to sip some water and maybe steal a moment's rest, quickly turned her full attention to Lilia. Hey, it's all right, darling," she murmured, reaching into the car seat to stroke her daughter's cheek. But the plane continued to bump and shudder in the unstable air. And Lilia, his cries grew louder, the kind of panicked wail only a baby can make. Her brother picked up on the distress. Felix, who had been half asleep in Amara's lap, opened his eyes and started, crying as well, the two babies' voices now rising in an unhappy duet. Amara's heart clenched. This was exactly what she'd feared, both of them crying uncontrollably, and she could only comfort one at a time. She held Felix close, gently bouncing him against her chest while trying to use her free hand to jostle Lilia's car seat and offer her a pacifier. But Lilia angrily spat the pacifier out, tiny face red and contorted as she screamed. The turbulence made matters worse. Amara couldn't easily take Lilia out of the car seat without unbuckling, and the seatbelt sign meant she was supposed to stay seated herself. She glanced helplessly at Rowan. Immediately, he sprang into action. Without a word, Rowan unbuckled his own belt briefly, scooting closer. "Here, let me take Felix," he offered, raising his voice over the crying. Amara, on the verge of tears herself, nodded gratefully and carefully transferred her son into Rowan's waiting arms. Rowan held the baby securely to his broad chest, murmuring a low, calming "Shh, I've got you to Felix." Then he secured his own seatbelt around himself again, now with the baby in his arms. Felix fussed, but having a strong pair of arms holding him and a deep voice rumbling. Reassurances in his ear began to work, his cries softened to whimpers. Now freed of Felix, Amara leaned over to unbuckle Lilia from the car seat, turbulence or not. The need to comfort her baby superseded all else. The plane jolted again, but Amara managed to lift Lilia and bring the sobbing baby to her chest. She hugged her daughter close, patting her back rhythmically. Lilia's cries were right in Amara's ear, loud and heart-wrenching. She could also hear Felix still whimpering against Rowan. All around them, other passengers were beginning to eye the commotion. A few sympathetic glances came from a couple across the aisle. The woman gave a small smile that seemed understanding. But other faces were less kind. The middle-aged man 2 rows back who had complained earlier was now openly scowling. He threw his hands up in exasperation and said loudly, "I knew this would happen. This is exactly why babies shouldn't be allowed in economy next to everyone." His voice carried above the cries, and Amara's cheeks burned at the public shaming. Before she could even attempt a reply, an irritated figure in airline uniform appeared at their row. Marjorie, as indicated by her gold-edged name tag, was a senior flight attendant, identifiable by the crisp, no-nonsense air she projected. With impeccably coiffed hair and a pressed navy blazer, she had a look of long experience, and at the moment, open impatience. Marjorie had been serving in business class when the baby's cries began echoing down the aisle. Now she loomed next to Rowan's seat, one hand braced on the overhead bin for balance as the plane continued to quiver. "Ma'am," she addressed Amara sharply over the noise, "you need to calm those children down." Her tone carried a hard edge, and her brow was creased in a frown. Flustered, Amara bobbed Lilia in her arms and stammered, I'm trying. They're scared from the turbulence." Lilia's screams did not abate. If anything, the baby was picking up on her mother's stress and crying harder. Marjorie pursed her lips. "Everyone is scared of the turbulence, but you don't see them screaming," she replied, with a pointed glance around as if the crying infants were a deliberate disruption. "You need to get them under control." A wave of humiliation washed over Amara. It felt as if all eyes in the cabin were on her and her misbehaving babies. She bounced Lilia a little faster, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Apologies to the child and to the air. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Rowan's jaw clenched visibly. He was still cradling Felix, who had calmed to soft sobs against Rowan, his chest, the baby's fist clutching the fabric of Rowan's sweater. Rowan looked up at Marjorie, his hazel eyes steely. "She is trying. There's no need to speak to her that way," he said, his voice calm but firm. Marjorie seemed taken aback for an instant that a fellow passenger she assumed, would rebuke her. She recovered quickly, narrowing her eyes at Rowan. "Sir, this is between me and the mother," she said curtly. "The cabin crew has received multiple complaints. It's our responsibility to ensure a comfortable flight for everyone." At this, the man from 2 rows back chimed in again, raising his voice. "Exactly. I can't hear myself think over here." A couple of other passengers looked away or nodded in agreement. Amara felt a tear escape her eye, mortification and desperation mixing into a storm inside her. She had dreaded this very scenario, her children inconsolable, fellow travelers, upset, and now a flight attendant essentially scolding her in front of everyone. Rowan gently rocked Felix and looked as though he was biting back a sharper retort. Quietly but intensely he addressed Marjorie. "The babies are crying because of the turbulence. Perhaps if we give it a minute, they'll settle. Yelling won't help." Marjorie's nostrils flared. She clearly did not appreciate being challenged. With a forced, tight smile that came off more as a grimace, she said, "I understand it's difficult. But this is exactly why some passengers feel bringing infants on a long flight is inconsiderate." Her eyes flicked to Amara, then to Felix in Rowan's arms. "Maybe one of you can walk them in the galley area to calm them once the seatbelt sign is off." Of course, she added with a note of reprimand that they had unbuckled the children at all. Amara's face was hot with shame. The implication that she was inconsiderate for even being on this flight stung deeply. She opened her mouth to apologize yet again, but nothing came out. Her throat was tight with emotion. Thankfully, at that moment, the turbulence began to subside. The plane leveled out and the shaking diminished to the occasional mild bump. Lilia's cries, which had been ear-piercing, started to taper down to exhausted. Whimpers as Amara's constant patting and soothing finally took effect. Perhaps the baby had tired herself out. Felix, nestled with Rowan, was now quiet, sucking on his own thumb. A blessed hush fell over their little corner of the plane. Marjorie sighed, as if she personally had willed the babies to quiet. "Thank you," she said, in a tone that somehow managed to be both perfunctory and condescending. She leaned closer to Amara, voice low but not low enough to escape Rowan's hearing. "Ma'am, if you can. Keep them calm. We will have to consider asking you to move to the back galley area for a while. We have to think of the other passengers." Amara bit her lip hard. Move to the galley? Was she to stand in the back of the plane for the rest of the flight because her babies had a rough moment? The unfairness and humiliation of that suggestion made her eyes well up. But she nodded quickly, afraid to make any more of a scene. I understand," she managed to say. With that, Marjorie straightened and plastered on a bright smile that disappeared the instant she turned away from them. She walked briskly up the aisle, presumably back to her station, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened, leaving Amara trembling and near tears. A softer voice spoke from the opposite side of the aisle. Iris, the kind flight attendant, had been standing a few rows back, looking on with sympathy. Now that things had calmed, she quietly approached. She gave Amara a little encouraging nod and handed her a bottle of water from the service tray. "Here, fresh water, in case you or the little ones need it," Iris said gently. The subtext was clear. This was more a gesture of moral support than necessity for hydration. "Thank you," Amara whispered, blinking back tears as she accepted the water. Iris also slipped a packet of tissues discreetly onto Amara's tray table, then turned and headed off to continue her duties, shooting a disapproving glance in the direction Marjorie had gone. Rowan carefully transferred Felix back into Amara's lap. Both babies were calmer now, though little hiccuping sobs still shook Lilia's small body as she clung to her mother's blouse. Amara held them both close, Felix in one arm and Lilia in the other, as much as possible, and closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. She felt utterly drained, and they were barely a quarter of the way through the flight. A quiet moment passed. Rowan's voice broke the silence, soft and concerned. "Are you all right?" he asked. Amara opened her eyes and dabbed at them with one of the tissues. She was embarrassed that he had seen her cry. "I'm okay," she lied unconvincingly. Her voice was shaky. "I'm just mortified. I knew they might cry, but I didn't expect to be treated like we're a problem that needs to be hidden." Rowan's expression was troubled. "You and your children are not a problem. You paid for your tickets like everyone else. You have every right to be here," he said quietly but firmly. There was a controlled anger in his tone, one that wasn't directed at Amara at all. She sensed it was aimed at the situation, at Marjorie's behavior perhaps. He took a breath, visibly calming himself before speaking again. "I'm sorry you were spoken to that way. It was out of line." Amara managed a faint smile of appreciation. "Thank you. You've been so kind. I don't know what I would have done without you here." That was the honest truth. Without Rowan's help and moral support, she might have broken down completely. Rowan hesitated, as if choosing his words. Then he said, "For what it's worth, I think the crew could have handled that better. This airline should prioritize helping parents, not making them feel worse." His jaw tightened again as he glanced toward the front of the cabin where the senior attendant had gone. "We actually have, airlines should have policies to accommodate parents with young infants, like providing extra space or empty seats when available, rather than scolding them." Amara looked at him curiously. "We actually have," he had started to say, almost as if he identified with the airline management. Perhaps he was just a loyal customer who knew the policies, she reasoned, or maybe he worked in the aviation industry. It was a strange slip, but she was too exhausted to ponder it. She simply nodded. "I tried to get a spare seat, but the flight was full," she murmured. "I guess there's only so much they can do. I wish people would be more understanding." Her voice hitched, and she focused on stroking Felix's downy hair to calm herself. Rowan lowered his voice, speaking gently. "Most people will forget about this in a few hours. Don't let a few rude ones ruin your journey." He then offered a reassuring smile. "Your babies are wonderful. They had a scare, but they're okay now. You're doing a terrific job." The gratitude that welled up in Amara was immeasurable. In the midst of her lowest moment on this flight, Rowan's steady presence was like a lifeline. She gave him a tremulous smile. "That means more than I can say." As the babies settled back down, Amara kept holding Lilia for a while, even after rebuckling herself. The little girl finally dozed off against her mother's shoulder, exhausted from crying. Felix soon followed suit, asleep in the warm cocoon of Amara's arms. Only once they were both peacefully sleeping did Amara gently place Lilia back into the bassinet. like car seat, and shift Felix's weight so he was resting more comfortably on her lap. Rowan quietly fetched one of the small airline blankets and draped it over Amara and Felix to keep them warm. He did it with such a tender, careful motion that Amara's eyes almost filled with tears again, but this time for a different reason. It had been so long since someone had taken care of her, even in a small way. Unbeknownst to Amara, the man beside her was not just a good Samaritan. He was Rowan Kingsley, the CEO of the very airline they were flying, traveling in secret to observe the flight. Rowan had made the decision to go undercover on this journey after hearing persistent whispers that his airline's customer service was deteriorating. He had deliberately chosen to fly anonymously in economy class, no executive perks, no fanfare, specifically to witness how passengers were treated on a typical flight. Never in his wildest plans did he expect to end up sitting next to a single mother of twins in crisis. But now that he had, the experience was striking a chord deep within him. Rowan's thoughts churned as he sat there in the semi-darkened cabin, the overhead lights dim for the sleeping passengers. He watched Amara finally close her eyes, one hand protectively resting on Felix's back as the toddler slept on her lap. There was a faint streak of dried tears on her cheek, and even in sleep her brow was creased with worry. Rowan felt something stir inside him, a mix of protectiveness, admiration, and anger on her behalf. He thought of his own upbringing. His mind flashed back to memories of his mother struggling to raise him and his sister alone after his father died. The way she'd juggle groceries and children with no helping hand. The way strangers would either offer pity or impatience. He recalled a specific memory of being on a bus as a child, his sister a wailing, infant in their mother's arms, and how a driver had scolded his mom for the noise. The shame and hurt on his mother's face that day still lived in Rowan's heart. Perhaps that was why he was especially sensitive to what he had just witnessed. For months now, Rowan had worried that the culture within his airline's staff had grown cold, more focused on rules and revenue than basic human compassion. That was exactly what he was here to assess. And indeed, Marjorie's approach just now, chastising a struggling mother, confirmed some of his fears. This wasn't how he wanted his airline represented, not at all. But he also saw a shining example of the opposite, the younger flight attendant, Iris, who had shown empathy, and even other passengers like the quiet woman across the aisle who gave Amara a supportive nod. There was kindness here too, it just needed to be encouraged, perhaps by better training or better leadership, Rowan mused. Either way, he had seen enough to know improvements were needed. Rowan glanced again at Amara, now dozing lightly with her head tilted back against the seat. In sleep, with a lock of dark hair falling over her face and her arms, cradling her child, she looked peaceful and strong, despite everything. He felt a swell of respect for this young woman who soldiered through so many challenges for the sake of her children. And something more than respect, an innate desire to ensure she never had to feel so alone and attacked again. Quietly, Rowan made a promise to himself. He would see this flight through and, once they landed, he would make things right, for Amara and for his airline. A short while later, with the twins still asleep and Amara resting, Rowan quietly excused himself to stretch his legs. He gave Amara's shoulder a gentle pat and whispered that he was going to use the lavatory and would be back shortly. She nodded drowsily, offering a trusting half-smile before closing her eyes again. Rowan made his way toward the back of the plane, moving carefully to not jostle any seats. The cabin was dim and mostly quiet now. Many passengers were snoozing or watching movies with headphones. The worst of the turbulence had passed, and a tentative peace had settled in. At the rear galley, he paused. The curtain was partially drawn, but through the gap he could see the silhouettes of two flight attendants, the senior attendant Marjorie and the junior one, Iris. They didn't notice Rowan nearby, as he pretended to examine the contents of a seatback pocket near the lavatory. Their voices, however, were audible over the drone of the engines. "I'm just saying, we could have offered to move her to that empty row near the back," Iris was saying in a hushed but urgent tone. "There are 2 free seats in the last row. She'd have more space, and maybe the babies would settle with a bassinet. It might be more comfortable for everyone." Iris sounded earnest, advocating on Amara's behalf. Marjorie's reply came, dripping with dismissive frost. "We are not rearranging half the cabin for one mother who can't handle her own kids. That row is empty for a reason. We often keep a couple seats free if possible to distribute weight or for crew rest. And besides, if you start coddling one passenger, others will want special treatment too. But our airline tries to accommodate parents with infants when we can. It's in the guidelines to help them out, even if it's just giving them an extra seat if available," Iris insisted, keeping her voice respectful but firm. "She's on a long flight alone with 2 babies. A little kindness would only reflect well on us." Marjorie huffed. "Kindness," she repeated with a hint of a sneer. "Iris, you're too new to remember, but we've done that before, and guess what? Other passengers complain about being moved or having to hear a crying baby no matter where we put them. You give them an inch and they'll take a mile. Besides, the woman needed a wake-up call. Better she learns to shut those kids up instead of expecting us to fix everything." Rowan felt a hot spike of anger in his chest at Marjorie's words. He kept his face neutral and stayed out of sight, but he was practically holding his breath to continue listening. Iris lowered her voice further, but Rowan could still catch the words. "With all due respect, I think it's our job to help, not to give wake-up calls. She's a paying customer, and a little empathy." Marjorie cut her off sharply. "I have plenty of empathy, dear, but I also have a plane full of other people to think about. Perhaps when you've been on the job as long as I have, you'll understand that we can't play nanny for every passenger with a sad story. We have rules, schedules, and standards to maintain." There was a brief pause. When Marjorie spoke again, her tone was slightly gentler, as if trying to mentor a junior colleague. "Look, I know you mean well. You're sweet. But if you want to advance in this career, you need to toughen up. Management notices when flight attendants keep things on track, not when they waste time on endless hand-holding. Do you think they promote crew who are always busy babysitting grown adults?" Iris did not respond immediately. Perhaps she was biting her tongue. Rowan's hands balled into fists at his sides. Ironically, little did Marjorie know that management was standing just a few feet away, hearing every word. Finally, Iris replied, her voice colored by frustration and disappointment. "Understood," she said simply. If that's how you see it, Rowan could imagine her posture, likely stiff, chastened but unhappy. "Good," Marjorie responded, in a clipped tone that signaled the discussion was over. "Now, go check on the forward cabin. I'll finish up the paperwork back here." Rowan heard movement. Iris stepping out of the galley. He quickly turned and slipped into the lavatory, shutting the door quietly behind him to avoid any awkwardness of being caught eavesdropping. His heart was pounding with anger and adrenaline. In the safe privacy of the small bathroom, he took a deep breath and ran a hand through his hair. What he had overheard was like a confirmation of everything he'd feared. Marjorie's philosophy was exactly the kind of toxic attitude he worried had infiltrated his airline's culture, a focus on enforcement over empathy, on protocol over people. And worse, she was passing that mindset on to the younger crew potentially, snuffing out the genuine compassion of attendants like Iris. Rowan splashed a bit of cool water on his face and stared at himself in the little mirror. He had to restrain the urge to march back out and reveal himself right now, to tell Marjorie that her attitude was unacceptable and that management very much does care about hand-holding when needed. But he knew it was wiser to wait. Confronting her mid-flight, in front of passengers and crew, could cause a scene. There would be a proper time and place to address this, and it was coming soon. Composing himself, Rowan left the lavatory and walked back toward his seat. On the way, he passed Iris in the aisle. She was helping an elderly passenger adjust their blanket, her face the picture of patience, despite what had just transpired. As Rowan went by, he caught her eye and gave her a warm, appreciative nod. It was subtle, but it conveyed what words could not at the moment. "Thank you for caring." Iris looked slightly surprised, then returned a faint smile. Perhaps she thought he was just a random passenger being friendly, but the acknowledgement seemed to lift her spirits a bit. Rowan returned to row 23, where Amara was now awake again, gently rocking Felix, who had started fussing in his sleep. Lilia was still dozing in the car seat. Amara looked at Rowan with concern, noticing the clouded expression on his face. "Everything all right?" she asked quietly. Rowan forced a reassuring smile as he sat down. "Yes, I'm fine," he said. He wasn't about to burden her with what he'd overheard. She had enough on her plate. Instead, he gestured to Felix, who was grizzling softly. "Mind if I take him for a bit?" Amara handed the baby over and watched as Rowan expertly calmed Felix, swaying slightly in his seat and humming that same lullaby as before. The sight made her heart squeeze. This man, practically a stranger, treating her child with such care. She had no idea that in Rowan's mind, the plan for how this journey would end was crystallizing. Driven by both professional duty and a personal conviction stirred by her and her twins. As Felix settled in Rowan's arms, Amara offered him a grateful smile. They were in this together, it seemed, whatever this was turning out to be. And despite the earlier turmoil, that partnership, forged by kindness in the midst of adversity, was something truly good to come out of the flight so far. The rest of the flight passed without further incident. Amara and the twins managed a little sleep, and Rowan remained by their side, ever helpful, fetching whatever small items she needed, gently rocking a waking baby back to sleep, and offering encouraging smiles. Marjorie largely avoided their row, and Iris quietly took over any necessary interactions, bringing Amara juice and a snack during the mid-flight meal while the babies dozed. Amara was grateful for the reprieve and the genuine kindness from Iris and Rowan alike. As the sky outside the windows lightened with the approach of dawn over Europe, the captain announced their descent into Paris. Amara felt a flutter of both relief and nervousness. Relief that they'd soon be on solid ground, and nervousness about meeting her late husband's parents after so long. Rowan helped her pack away the half-unpacked diaper bag and secure the car seat once Lilia was back in it for landing. Both babies were awake now, but relatively calm, sucking on bottles during the descent to help their ears adjust. The landing at Charles de Gaulle Airport was smooth. A ripple of applause broke out from some passengers, a common tradition on long flights arriving safely. Amara joined in softly, smiling down at Felix and Lilia. "We made it," she thought, exhausted but proud that they had all survived the journey's trials. As the plane taxied to the gate, passengers began gathering their belongings. Amara busied herself collecting scattered toys and ensuring the twins were securely in her arms now that the car seat had to be detached. Rowan stood and retrieved his carry-on and then helped pull Amara's bag from under the seat. He effortlessly hefted the bulky diaper bag onto his shoulder alongside his own bag, silently signaling that he would carry it off the plane for her. She gave him a thankful look. When the seatbelt sign turned off with a chime, everyone stood in the aisle, stretching and impatient to disembark. The middle-aged man from 2 rows back was already on his feet, jostling to move forward. He ended up right behind Rowan and Amara in the tight aisle, practically looming over them as they waited for the doors to open. Amara could feel the man's sour mood like a cold draft on her neck. She struggled to hold both twins, a squirming Felix and a sleepy Lilia, while also trying to maneuver out of her row. Rowan placed a steadying hand at her back to support her, but the impatient man behind them let out a loud sigh. "This is why people with tons of luggage and babies should deplane last," he muttered. Rowan's eyes flashed as he half-turned. In a polite yet pointed tone, he addressed the man. "Sir, would you mind giving the lady a bit of space? We'll all get out soon." The man bristled, clearly not expecting pushback. "Mind your own business," he snapped. "You've been playing hero with her this whole flight, but some of us have connections to catch. If she knew what she was doing, she'd let others off first." Amara flushed, clutching her children tighter. Rowan opened his mouth, and for a moment Amara feared he might truly lose his temper. But before he could reply, a voice from the front called down the aisle, "Everyone, please remain patient as we deplane row by row." It was Marjorie, performing her standard post-flight duties with a plastic smile. The jet bridge was attached now, and the front doors opened. First-class passengers began to exit, followed by the rows ahead of them. Rowan took a deep breath. The time had come. He looked over at Amara and gave her a reassuring nod, as if to say, "Trust me." Then he raised his hand slightly and called out in a clear voice, "Excuse me, Miss Marjorie." The senior flight attendant turned, initially with a hint of annoyance at being hailed like a servant. "Yes, sir," she replied, her tone courteous for the benefit of onlooking passengers. She walked a few steps down the aisle toward row 23, maintaining a professional facade. "If you could please wait your turn, we'll have you deplane in just a moment." Rowan stepped into the aisle, standing upright with an air of calm authority that hadn't been there before. Despite wearing jeans and a casual sweater, at this moment he exuded a presence that made people pause. Even the cranky man behind them hushed, sensing something unfolding. "Actually, I'd like a word with you and your crew before I leave," Rowan said. There was no anger in his voice now, just a certain firmness. Marjorie blinked, caught off guard. "I'm sorry, a word with our crew. Are you feeling all right, sir?" She glanced at Amara, perhaps suspecting this might be about the earlier incident. Her posture stiffened. By now, Iris and another crew member had also turned their attention to the exchange. A few nearby passengers were watching curiously. Amara herself looked between Rowan and Marjorie, sensing a shift in the air but not knowing what exactly was happening. Why was Rowan drawing attention like this? A word with the crew? Rowan reached into his pocket and pulled out a slim leather wallet. From it, he extracted a business card along with a sleek black ID badge. Holding them out for Marjorie to see, he introduced himself in a quiet, authoritative tone. That nonetheless carried through the now hushed cabin. "My name is Rowan Kingsley. I'm the CEO of this airline." There was a beat of stunned silence. Marjorie's eyes widened, darting to the ID badge, which indeed bore Rowan's name and photo, and the airline's emblem with the title Chief Executive Officer beneath it. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Behind her, Iris's jaw literally dropped, though she quickly composed herself. A ripple of murmurs swept through the nearby passengers. Those within earshot began whispering in surprise. The grumpy man behind Amara took an awkward step back, as if trying to disappear into the background. Amara felt her heart skip as she processed the words. "CEO?" Her gaze snapped to Rowan's face, the face of the man who had held her crying son, who had sat with her for hours offering help and comfort, who had hummed lullabies. He looked back at her with an almost apologetic half-smile, as if saying he hadn't meant to deceive her. In that moment, Amara realized two things. Rowan had never actually lied about who he was. She'd never asked beyond his first name. And more importantly, despite his powerful position, he had been nothing but genuine and compassionate with her all along. Marjorie finally found her voice, though it wavered noticeably. "Oh, Mr. Kingsley, I didn't realize." Her cheeks had flushed a deep crimson. The confidence had drained from her demeanor, replaced by a mix of panic and mortification. Rowan held up a hand to gently stop her stammering. "No, you didn't realize. And that's the point." His voice remained calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it now. "You had no idea who I was, and yet I was right here in your cabin, observing everything." Marjorie swallowed hard. Beside her, Iris looked both nervous and hopeful, perhaps anticipating that Rowan would address what happened. A couple of other flight attendants farther up were craning their necks to see. The departing passengers too had largely halted, watching the drama unfold rather than continuing to push toward the exit. Rowan continued, his tone measured. "I sat here this entire flight and watched how a passenger, a mother traveling with 2 infants, was treated by you." He glanced toward Amara, and her breath caught. She realized he was talking about her. She also noticed that he carefully said a passenger instead of naming her, likely to not embarrass her further in front of everyone. For that, she was grateful. She hugged Felix and Lilia close, standing just behind Rowan in the aisle, a silent witness to his words. Marjorie opened her mouth again, perhaps to offer an excuse, but Rowan did not give her the chance. "Your behavior, Marjorie, was unacceptable," he said, the gentle timbre of his voice now carrying a steel undercurrent. "I heard you scold and shame this passenger for the understandable cries of her babies during turbulence. I heard you threaten to banish her to the galley as if she and her children were a nuisance to be hidden away. A collective gasp came from some passengers who hadn't been aware of the incident. Amara felt her face heat up at the mention of it, but she kept her head high. Rowan was standing up for her, for them, in front of everyone, and that stirred something powerful in her chest. "I also overheard," Rowan continued, now pinning Marjorie with a stare that made the woman shrink, "the way you spoke to your junior colleague afterward, discouraging her from showing empathy, prioritizing a rigid approach over basic kindness. Is that correct?" Marjorie's eyes flicked toward Iris in sheer disbelief and betrayal. Clearly, she hadn't realized Rowan might have heard that private galley conversation. She looked back at Rowan, desperate to explain. "Sir, I was only trying to uphold policy and manage the situation for all passengers," she croaked. I believed I was doing what was necessary. If I'd known who you—" Rowan's expression hardened slightly. "If you'd known I was the CEO, you would have acted differently, treated a passenger differently." He shook his head. "That is exactly the problem, Marjorie. You treat people with decency, not because they might be important or watching, but because it's the right thing to do." Marjorie's lip quivered. She looked thoroughly chastened and terrified of losing her job on the spot. "Sir, I'm truly sorry," she managed. "I've served this airline for 20 years. I pride myself on professionalism, but perhaps I misjudged this situation." She cast a quick, remorseful glance at Amara. "Ma'am, please accept my apologies. I was out of line." Amara felt a strange mix of validation and pity. She nodded slightly, acknowledging the apology but not trusting herself to speak in that charged moment. Rowan allowed Marjorie's apology to hang in the air for a second. Then he said, "I appreciate the apology, but the issue remains. We clearly have some training and cultural improvements to make in our staff." He then turned to include Iris and the other crew in his gaze. "Let me also say that I observed acts of true kindness and professionalism as well." He gave a small, genuine smile in Iris's direction. "Iris, you demonstrated exactly the kind of empathy and assistance we hope to see for passengers in need. Thank you." Iris's eyes lit up in relief and gratitude. "Thank you, sir," she said softly, straightening with pride. Rowan nodded. "I will make sure your good work today is recognized." Then he looked back to Marjorie, whose face had gone pale. "And Marjorie, I will be filing a report about what happened here. I expect you'll be contacted by your supervisors. We will discuss whether additional training or any other actions are necessary." Marjorie bowed her head slightly. "Yes, Mr. Kingsley, I understand," she said meekly. It was jarring for Amara to see the once authoritative woman reduced to this state, but it was also a testament to accountability being served. By now, many passengers were outright gawking or listening intently. The grumpy man who had been giving Amara trouble looked positively shell-shocked. He was pressing himself against a seat back to stay out of the line of fire. Rowan noticed him and addressed the man directly in a courteous yet pointed manner. "Sir, I believe you owe this lady an apology as well." He gestured toward Amara. The man's face went through a series of contortions, indignation, embarrassment, then contrition, as all eyes turned to him. Confronted by the CEO and the silent expectation of those around, his bravado evaporated. I'm sorry," he mumbled toward Amara, not meeting her eyes. "I was frustrated and spoke out of turn." Amara, ever gracious despite her hurt, replied quietly, "I accept your apology." She didn't have energy for more, but her dignity in that simple statement was evident. Rowan then glanced around at the watching passengers and gave a polite, if somewhat formal, smile. "Thank you all for your patience," he addressed them generally. "We hope, despite some difficulties, you had a pleasant flight. Please enjoy your stay in Paris." It was a surreal turn of events, the CEO himself doing the goodbye announcement in person. A few of the nearby passengers even clapped, and one said aloud, "Thank you, Mr. Kingsley," with admiration in her voice. With that, Rowan turned back to Amara. His eyes softened from the steely executive gaze to something warmer, the familiar kindness she knew. "Shall we?" he said gently, as the aisle ahead cleared for them to finally exit. Amara, still reeling from what she had witnessed, simply nodded. Cradling Lilia against her shoulder and holding Felix's hand, she followed Rowan down the aisle. Iris stood near the door, and as Amara passed, the young flight attendant gave her an encouraging smile and whispered, "Take care." Amara mouthed, "Thank you," in return. Marjorie stood by as well, looking contrite. She did not meet Amara's eyes, but murmured, "Ma'am, I really am sorry." Amara offered her a faint, forgiving smile. She could see that the woman genuinely regretted how she handled things, even if it took a shock like this to realize it. And then they were stepping out into the jet bridge, the cool airport air hitting their faces. Amara felt a bit unsteady on her feet after the long flight and the dramatic confrontation. Rowan noticed and lightly touched her back to steady her. He still carried the heavy diaper bag along with his own, and in his other arm, he had taken Felix from her to help manage the children. The little boy was perfectly content in Rowan's arms, playing with the zipper on Rowan's sweater. Walking up the jet bridge, away from the plane, felt like entering a whole new world. Amara inhaled and exhaled slowly. It was over. The flight from hell had landed, and yet it had delivered her an angel in disguise. She glanced sideways at Rowan, who turned to look at her at the same moment. The Paris morning light from the terminal windows fell on his face, highlighting the concern and care etched there. "I can't believe all that just happened," Amara said, her voice a bit shaky with disbelief and fatigue. Rowan gave a soft chuckle. "I imagine it's not every day you find out the person sitting next to you is an airline executive." "Executive?" "Try the chief executive," Amara replied, a note of amazement in her tone. She paused in her steps, forcing Rowan to stop as well. Other passengers flowed around them in the terminal corridor, oblivious to the significant moment occurring for these two. Lilia babbled softly in Amara's arms, as if to echo her mother's astonishment. Amara looked up into Rowan's eyes. You're really the CEO?" she asked, still needing confirmation beyond the spectacle she'd just seen. Rowan shifted Felix slightly on his hip and nodded. "I am. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you earlier. I was traveling incognito to see how things were going on our flights. I honestly didn't expect to be so directly involved." Amara let out a breathy laugh. "I'd say you got a very direct look." Then her face turned earnest, emotions welling up. "Rowan, I don't even know how to thank you. You saved me in so many ways on this flight." He shook his head, dismissing the idea of gratitude owed. "You don't have to thank me. I did what anyone with a conscience would do. And I meant what I said back there. You and your children deserve to be treated so much better." Tears pricked at Amara's eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratefulness and relief. "Still, thank you. I was so close to losing hope back there. And then, you were there for us." Rowan smiled gently and reached out to brush a stray tear from her cheek. With his thumb, a gesture so tender it made Amara's heart stutter. "Always," he said softly. The word hung between them, hinting at a promise that extended beyond just the duration of a flight. In that moment, surrounded by the dull roar of the airport and people rushing past, Amara realized that what she felt wasn't just gratitude. It was something warmer, deeper, a budding affection for this man who had been a stranger mere hours ago, but now felt so integral to her and her children's journey. The way Felix curled up easily against him, and how Lilia reached her tiny hand out to tug. At Rowan's sleeve, it was as if even the twins recognized a safe and caring presence. Rowan cleared his throat gently. "I've arranged for one of our airline service agents to meet you here and assist you through immigration and baggage," he said. "And if it's all right with you, I'd like to accompany you to make sure you and the little ones get where you need to go safely." Amara felt relief wash over her anew. The idea of navigating the sprawling airport, immigration lines and baggage claim, alone with 2 babies and all her gear, had been daunting even before the flight. Having Rowan by her side a bit longer was a blessing she wouldn't refuse. That would be wonderful," she admitted, smiling. "Although I'm sure you have a busy schedule." "I do have some meetings later today," Rowan interjected, "but nothing that can't wait a little," and frankly he gave a small laugh. After what happened on that flight, making sure you're okay is my top priority right now." Warmth bloomed in Amara's chest at his words. She nodded. "All right. I'd appreciate the help." Together, they continued down the corridor, an unusual trio, or rather quartet, a young mother with her babies and a CEO carrying a diaper bag and a toddler, walking side by side. Anyone who glanced at them might have thought they were a family. True to his word, Rowan stayed with Amara and the twins through the entire arrival process. An airline customer service agent greeted them at the gate, clearly briefed that a very important person, albeit an incognito one, was present, and whisked them past the usual immigration queue via a fast-track lane. Amara felt a bit self-conscious at the special treatment, but Rowan reassured her quietly, "You've earned a little break." With Rowan's help and the agent's luggage cart, they collected her suitcases and the stroller at baggage claim with ease. Near the arrivals hall, Amara spotted her late husband's parents waiting eagerly. The older couple's faces lit up on seeing her, and especially the babies. Amara's heart swelled. Despite her exhaustion, she was excited and relieved to reunite with family. Rowan hung back respectfully as Amara rushed into a flurry of hugs and French greetings with the grandparents. There were tears of joy as the grandparents held their grandchildren for the first time. After a few emotional moments, Amara turned to introduce Rowan, who stood a few paces away, gently smiling at the touching scene. "Grandmère, grand-père," she addressed her in-laws in French. "This is Rowan, a friend who helped me so much on the flight." She didn't delve into details of him being the CEO. It didn't seem necessary or even believable in that moment. To them, he was simply the kind stranger who had aided their daughter-in-law. Rowan greeted them in polite, somewhat practiced French. He was conversant, it appeared, and the elderly couple thanked him profusely, almost effusively. Her father-in-law clapped Rowan on the back and said in accented English, "You are a good man. Merci. Thank you for watching over them." Her mother-in-law even insisted on giving Rowan a quick, warm hug, much to his humble embarrassment. Their hired car had arrived to take the whole family home. Rowan helped load Amara's luggage into the trunk and ensured the car seat and stroller were snugly stowed. Finally, it was time for goodbyes. To Amara, it felt abrupt. Part of her deeply didn't want this extraordinary man to just walk out of her life now. She found herself lingering by the open car door even after the bags were packed. Rowan crouched down to say farewell to the twins, gently tickling Felix's chin and offering Lilia one of his fingers to hold. "It was great meeting you two," he said softly to the babbling infants, as if they were fully part of the conversation. "Take good care of your mom, okay?" Felix responded by blowing a small raspberry, making them all laugh. Lilia gripped Rowan's finger tightly in her tiny fist, as if unwilling to let go. Straightening up, Rowan met Amara's eyes. There was 1,000 unsaid things in that moment. He cleared his throat. "Amara, I'll be in Paris for a couple of days for work. If you need anything at all, here's my number." He handed her a business card he'd pulled from his wallet, embossed with his name, multiple phone numbers, and email. With a pen, he quickly scribbled a different local number on the back. "That's my personal cell while I'm here." Amara took the card, holding it as something precious. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." Her voice was gentle, earnest. I would love to see you again, if you have time. Not because I need more help," she added with a shy smile, "but because I'd like to properly thank you. Maybe with a cup of coffee? Or a meal?" A delighted surprise appeared on Rowan's face, as if he'd been hoping she might say that. "I'd like that very much," he replied without hesitation. "How about tomorrow afternoon? I'm free after 3. Perhaps we can meet at a cafe. I know a nice spot near the Luxembourg Gardens." "That sounds perfect," Amara agreed, feeling a flutter of excitement mingled with nervousness. It had been so long since she'd even thought about meeting someone in a context that felt like, well, not exactly a date, but something adjacent to it. They exchanged a few more words, settling the details. As they finally said goodbye, Rowan gently squeezed Amara's hand, a brief, warm touch that sent a pleasant thrill through her. Then he stepped back and waved as the driver closed the car door and the vehicle pulled away. Amara found herself looking back through the rear window at Rowan's figure receding. He stood in the airport curbside, watching until they were out of sight. She felt the absence of him immediately, but her heart was buoyed by the knowledge she'd see him the next day. That night, after the emotional reunion and once the twins were safely asleep, in the nursery at their grandparents' apartment, Amara had a moment to herself. Lying in bed, she replayed the events of the day, marveling at how fate had placed Rowan in that seat next to her. So much could have gone worse if not for him, and beyond gratitude, she acknowledged a growing fondness. In the dim glow of her phone, she sent a quick text to his number, "Bonsoir, Rowan. It's Amara. Just wanted to say merci encore, thank you again, and confirm our meeting tomorrow at 3 p.m. Looking forward to it." Within minutes, her phone pinged with a reply, "Bonsoir, Amara. I'm looking forward to it as well. Sleep well. You must be exhausted after today. See you tomorrow. Day." The smile that tugged at Amara's lips as she read his message stayed with her as she drifted off, feeling happier and more at peace than she had in a very long time. The next afternoon was crisp and sunny, a beautiful day in Paris. Amara arrived at the cafe by the Luxembourg Gardens a bit early, pushing the twins in their stroller. She had chosen to bring them along for the outing, partly because the grandparents had an appointment that day, and partly because she felt it was only right that Rowan see them too. After all, they were an integral part of her life. If Rowan minded the presence of two little ones on what might otherwise resemble a date, he certainly hadn't indicated any such thing. She spotted him at an outdoor table under a red awning, a coffee already in front of him and a second cup across from him, presumably for her. He stood up the instant he saw her, waving and breaking into that heart-melting smile. To Amara's pleasant surprise, he wasn't alone. Perched on the spare chair was a small stuffed teddy bear with an airline logo t-shirt. Rowan quickly explained, "I thought Felix and Lilia might each like a little gift, so I have another one in my bag. Figured I'd enlist this fellow to hold your seat." Amara was charmed by the gesture. "That's so sweet of you," she said. She unbuckled the twins from the stroller and brought them onto her lap one by one so Rowan could hand them their new teddy bears. The babies gurgled happily at the sight of the soft toys, and Amara laughed. "I think you have two new fans," she joked. They settled in, Amara with her latte that Rowan had pre-ordered. He remembered. She mentioned preferring lattes during a chat on the flight. The twins alternated between sitting in the stroller, munching on baby biscuits, and being entertained by either Rowan or Amara. It was a surprisingly relaxed afternoon. They talked for hours, the conversation flowing easily like a gentle river. Rowan opened up about his life, how he'd started in the airline industry working odd jobs right out of college, his passion for aviation, and his rise to leadership. He talked about his family too, his mother. As Amara had guessed, she'd been a widow who raised him and his sister alone. "I think part of why what happened on the flight hit me so hard is that I saw so much of my mom in you," Rowan confessed softly, looking at Amara in a way that made her feel seen. "She went through similar struggles. I remember even as a kid, wishing I could do something when people were unkind to her. So, maybe in a way, helping you was also like standing up for her memory." Amara reached across the small table and placed her hand over Rowan's. "She raised a wonderful son," she said sincerely. "I'm sure she'd be so proud of you, not for being a CEO, but for the kindness you show." Her touch lingered on his hand, and he gently turned his palm upward to entwine his fingers with hers. The intimacy of that simple gesture made Amara's pulse quicken. In turn, Amara shared more about her late husband, Jason, how they'd met in college, his adventurous spirit that led them to travel often, which gave her at least some preparation for flying with kids, and the illness that took him shortly after the twins were born. "It was devastating," she said, voice trembling slightly at the recollection. "For a long time, I was just surviving day to day, focusing on the babies and nothing else. This trip, it was the first thing I dared to do that was our plan, Jason and mine, to have the kids know his family. I almost didn't go through with it because I was so afraid of managing alone." Rowan squeezed her hand gently. "You did manage. Even if I wasn't there, you would have found a way. I have no doubt. You're incredibly strong, Amara. She looked down, smiling modestly. Maybe, but I'm very glad you were there. You turned what could have been a nightmare into something meaningful. She glanced at the twins, who were each gnawing contentedly on their bear's ears. And not just because you helped with the kids, because of you, your company, your understanding. Rowan's thumb stroked the back of Amara's hand. His eyes held hers steadily. I feel the same way. These past 2 days, meeting you and the little ones, it's been unexpectedly wonderful. I know you came on that flight expecting nothing but a hard time, and I came on expecting just to observe anonymously. Instead, I found... He paused, choosing his words carefully. I found something I didn't know I was missing. Amara's breath caught. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow on Rowan's brown hair and made his hazel eyes shine with emotion. She felt a tug in her heart, a mixture of longing and hope. Rowan, She hesitated, suddenly a bit shy. It had been so long since she'd entertained feelings for anyone. Was it too fast? But everything with Rowan felt so genuine and safe. Perhaps sensing her hesitation, Rowan gave a reassuring smile and continued softly, I know it's soon. We've only just met, and you've been through so much, but I have to be honest, I care about you, Amara. Deeply. And I care about Felix and Lilia too. They're amazing kids. He chuckled as Felix dropped his biscuit, and Rowan instinctively picked it up, wiping it clean and handing it back, the ease of his action showing how comfortable he'd become around her children. I don't want to overstep, but I also don't want to ignore what I feel. Tears glistened in Amara's eyes, tears of happiness this time. You're not overstepping, she whispered. If anything, I feel the same way. It scares me, but it also feels right. Saying it out loud released a weight she hadn't realized was on her heart. She was allowing herself to feel again, to look at a future where she could be happy, not just coping. Rowan released a breath as if he'd been holding it, and a radiant smile broke across his face. In that lovely Parisian cafe, with the sounds of children's laughter and birds chirping. In the gardens, Rowan and Amara's bond blossomed into something unmistakably real. He stood from his chair and moved beside her on the bench seat, an unspoken question in his eyes. Amara nodded slightly, answering it. Gently, Rowan put an arm around her, drawing her closer. Amara closed her eyes as he pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. It wasn't overly bold or rushed. It was a promise of tenderness and respect. When she tilted her face up, he met her lips in a sweet, lingering kiss that sent warmth all through her. It was the first time she had kissed someone since Jason's passing, and though tears slipped from the corners of her eyes, they were tears of healing. She felt a rush of peace, as if Jason himself were giving her a nod of approval to embrace this new chapter. They pulled apart slightly, foreheads touching. Both smiled, a little breathless, while the twins babbled obliviously. Rowan chuckled softly. I think we might have an audience. He nodded toward an older couple at the next table who had noticed their affectionate moment and were now smiling at them kindly. Amara laughed, blushing, and snuggled happily against Rowan's shoulder. Any doubts or guilt she had about moving forward dissipated in the golden late afternoon light. Life had given her a second chance at love, in the most unexpected of ways, on a turbulent flight, with crying babies, next to a man who turned out to have a heart of gold, and, incidentally, an airline to his name. And for the first time in a long while, Amara felt excited about what tomorrow would bring. Over the next several months, Amara and Rowan's lives became ever more intertwined. After that serendipitous trip, Rowan returned to New York, where his company's headquarters were, and Amara eventually flew home with the twins, having had a wonderful visit with family. But distance proved no obstacle for their blossoming love. Rowan visited Amara frequently, and when his work allowed, he flew her and the children out to see him. Each reunion only strengthened their bond. The twins lit up whenever they saw Rowan, their giggles and excited kicks at the sight of him leaving no doubt that they remembered and adored their mother's special friend. And Rowan, who had never imagined himself as a father figure before, found untold joy in the role. He would get down on the floor to play blocks with Felix, or patiently read picture books to Lilia, using funny voices that sent the babies into peals of laughter. Amara often watched those moments with her heart brimming, marveling at how fate had brought this caring man into their lives. By the time spring flowers bloomed, Rowan and Amara were officially a couple, deeply in love. Rowan had gently, earnestly asked Amara if she would consider relocating to New York so they could be closer. After thoughtful discussions, and with the blessing of Amara's extended family, she agreed. He arranged a beautiful home for them, a place where the twins could have a nursery and a backyard to play in, and where Amara could pursue her career. With Rowan's encouragement, she resumed her work as a freelance graphic designer, setting up a home office. One sunny afternoon in that backyard, as the twins, now toddlers, toddled around, chasing butterflies, Rowan knelt before Amara and presented her with a ring. "You've made me happier than I ever knew I could be," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Amara, you and the kids are my family now. Will you marry me?" Tears of joy streaming down her face, Amara said yes. Felix and Lilia clapped, mostly because they saw their mama laughing and crying happily, and Rowan smiling, so they clapped along. It was an easy decision. Rowan had long since proven his love, not just to Amara, but to her children as well, and she knew Jason's memory would be honored, not replaced, in this new chapter of her life. Meanwhile, the events of that fateful flight led to positive changes in Rowan's airline. True to his word, Rowan followed up on the incident, and Marjorie, the senior attendant, faced formal disciplinary action. She wasn't fired. Rowan believed in second chances, but she was required to undergo intensive customer care retraining and was put on probation. In a personal letter to Rowan, Marjorie expressed remorse and thanked him for the wake-up call. She admitted she had grown hardened over the years and promised to rediscover the compassion that had once led her to the job. It was a humbling lesson for her about treating every passenger with respect, no matter how stressful the situation. And Iris received a commendation and a promotion to senior flight attendant. At an awards ceremony, Rowan personally highlighted her exemplary empathy and cited it as the gold standard for the airline. Iris was overjoyed and confessed that she had been on the verge of quitting due to pressure from some colleagues to toughen up, but after the recognition, she felt vindicated that kindness and patience were indeed valued. And company-wide, Rowan initiated a new Family First program. Flight crews were trained with refreshed guidelines on assisting parents traveling with young children, from offering extra help and amenities to creating a more welcoming atmosphere on board. The airline even introduced a policy to block an empty adjacent seat for parents, with lap infants whenever flights weren't full, to give them more space. Feedback from passengers improved notably, and stories began to circulate of flight attendants going the extra mile for families. Rowan made sure to highlight these as victories, reinforcing a culture where empathy was as important as efficiency. Undercover evaluations became a regular, albeit secret practice for all levels of management, not to catch employees out, but to ensure the company stayed rooted in real customer experiences. Rowan himself admitted to Amara with a chuckle that he might not don a disguise again anytime soon. "I got more than I bargained for on that first attempt," he joked, but he empowered others in leadership to stay grounded and never judge passengers' situations without understanding. One evening, about a year after that pivotal flight, Rowan and Amara boarded a plane, together, this time as a family, with the twins happily clambering between them. They were flying to Paris once more to visit the grandparents, but with a special itinerary. Afterward, a vacation in the south of France that would also serve as their honeymoon. As they settled into their seats, first class, courtesy of Rowan though, Amara jokingly insisted they'd be fine in economy. An announcement came over the PA. "We'd like to welcome back Mr. Rowan Kingsley and his family on board. We're honored to have you flying with us." Rowan blushed at the recognition, but Amara squeezed his hand, her eyes shining. During the flight, little Felix started to cry from a minor ear discomfort. Immediately, a flight attendant hurried over with a lollipop, approved, for toddlers to help his ears pop and a playful puppet to distract him. The young man smiled at Amara. "We've got it under control, ma'am." Amara smiled back, serene and grateful. It was a world of difference from a year ago, a testament to how much had changed. Rowan looked at Amara with a tender expression. "They're taking good care of us," he remarked. "You set a good example," Amara replied, leaning her head on his shoulder as Lilia snoozed in her arms. Rowan wrapped his arm around her and murmured, "All of this, the changes at the airline, this flight, our life together, it started because of you and the twins, because fate put us together." Amara turned her face up to his, eyes full of love. "It started because you chose to sit in economy," she teased softly, "and because you have a heart that couldn't ignore a mother in need." He chuckled and pressed a kiss to her hair. "Best decision I ever made." As the plane cruised into the sunset, Amara closed her eyes and counted her blessings. What began as the most harrowing trip of her life became the journey that led her to a new love and a new family. She had lost one love tragically, but life had taught her that from compassion springs hope, and from hope, new beginnings. And as she felt Rowan's steady heartbeat under her cheek and heard the soft breaths of her sleeping children, she knew in her soul that kindness, even in the face of scorn, can truly change lives, often in ways we'd never expect. In the end, a single mother with crying twin babies had not only found empathy and respect, but also unexpected love. And a man with great power had found a greater purpose, guided by his heart. Their story became a shining reminder to everyone that no matter our role, parent, stranger, employee or CEO, we should always treat others with care and understanding. You never know what wonders might happen when you do. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope tonight. Comment. One lesson you're taking with you. Mine is, compassion changes culture. If you believe love still finds us in unexpected places, leave a heart in the comments. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss the next inspiring tale. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Your presence means the world. Until the next story, stay kind, stay brave, and remember, love is louder.